The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Welcome along. My name's Adam Jull. I'm the founder and CEO at IMSCAD and IMSCAD Cloud. And it's great to have you here in these challenging times. Thank you for making the time to join. We're just going to give it another 30 seconds because we've got a few people joining now, I can see, on our system. So we'll just wait a little bit. But effectively, obviously, hopefully you're all keeping safe, and I imagine most of you are at home. Maybe a few of you in the office. In the UK here, because we're based in the UK, it's obviously a lockdown at the moment, so we're all at home. But the sun is shining, and we're all in good spirits nonetheless. But we actually, have had a lot of inquiries from various customers around this type of thing. Obviously, as you can imagine, we work a lot in the Autodesk world. We've been around a long time in this, and I'll get to that in a minute. But effectively, I've called this webinar this time Cloud-Based VDI, Is It the New Normal for Autodesk Customers? I've focused in on Autodesk customers, but really, this is for anyone with a graphical workload. Someone who has designers, someone who has, an architectural engineering, construction practice, or engineering firm. These are, all are the areas where, these sort of remote working situations you've been thrown into are, a real challenge. So hopefully we can give you some really good information today, give you some ideas, and of course we're always around to talk about it further if you need us to. So without further ado, we'll start the presentation. So I'm going to start just obviously telling you a bit about us anyway, for those of you that don't know us. We started out, as I say, 8+ years ago now. IMSCAD were effectively doing numerous on-premise deployments involving solutions like NVIDIA Grid, and I would say mainly for Autodesk customers. We've done 700+ deployments in total, as it says there, mainly in the Autodesk world, so Autodesk customers, either through Autodesk resellers, and then obviously direct to customers, and obviously customers that wanted, Citrix, VMware, those type of virtualization technologies in their business, running their desktops for either remote working solutions or just to sort of centralize data processing and not have that kind of spread out approach that you have obviously with a sort of a dispersed workforce if you've got numerous offices, etc. So what happened was, obviously, after about sort of 5 years, we realized the cloud was becoming more and more prevalent in the market. And although there wasn't really a solution for graphics per se in the cloud, 3-4 years ago, so we thought we'd make the early move into launching IMSCAD Cloud, which is now pretty well established in the market, selling global solutions and desktop as a service effectively, which is, and we work with a number of cloud providers with that business to deliver that. And it's not just public cloud, and I'll basically come back to that further in the presentation, because obviously I think where people get a little bit confused is when they think about cloud, they think about Microsoft Azure or AWS or Google, but actually there's a whole world of other cloud providers out there that are interesting and offer different things that could be very advantageous to your business that you may not know about. So it's something we've done a lot of groundwork on this, and I think we've got a really good broad knowledge of this sort of space. So again, I'll get more to that as we go further into the presentation. But effectively, as a business, we've got 45 staff. We're based in the UK, as I said. We do most of our deployments in the US, I have to say. And you may say, well, you're in the UK, how does that work? Well, obviously, we can do everything remotely. So the wonders of technology these days, we can remote in VPN into systems and obviously help customers get the best out of their Citrix or VMware environment, which is very variably what they use. And obviously now with Azure and AWS in the space, we've got new sort of areas to work on, which we've done, and obviously deploying in those public cloud providers is somewhat complex if you don't know what you're doing. So there's a lot of area there where we assist customers in getting the right sort of stack put together for that type of deployment. So effectively, we are a consulting business. So we come in, we have a look, we help you decide. We're very independent. We don't favour any one solution. We don't sell hardware or anything like that. We're not a partner in that sense, a reseller in that sense. But we do have a 24/7 global help desk where we support our customers. So we basically deploy and support, and that's what we do, whether that's in the public cloud, on-premise, or in a private cloud type approach. And obviously, we've been contracted by all the major graphical vendors in the past, doing various third-party testing projects. So I think we've got a good understanding. We've been around a long time, and hopefully, if you fall into these key markets that we work in, which I think most of you do, from what I've seen who's registered, you're in the right place to sort of look at this type of solution now and understand maybe stuff that you didn't know to date. Because obviously, when you're dealing with a graphical app, it's so much different to just deploying a normal desktop environment. And obviously, when everyone got locked down earlier in the year, there was, of course, this big rush home, and everyone had to scramble around and give their users as best a solution as possible. And obviously, good old VPNs kind of stepped in there and obviously deployed a solution to a level. But obviously, there's obviously much better ways of doing it than say the old-fashioned VPN way. But obviously, as a business, of course, apart from the markets we work in, we're very skilled at Citrix and VMware particularly, and obviously we've just always focused on the Autodesk world really, and that's why obviously I wanted to sort of make the title of this webinar around the Autodesk applications and an ecosystem. But obviously we met with many ISVs, right across the whole breadth. All you guys would use. It doesn't matter to us, as long as we know what it is. We've deployed pretty much every major app, I think, in our deployments. Nothing really stumped us, yet. So, we've got a good application broad knowledge. And of course, that just translates straight, as I say, through whether you do on-premise solutions where you buy servers, you want to do a private cloud approach, which is renting servers on a per user per month basis, or in a public cloud, GPU solution, which is something in Azure particularly that we work with. Whereas, obviously it's a different deployment altogether. But, all have their value. And in this webinar, we're going to talk through some of those values. And I think hopefully will sort of lay it out to you, from our perspective, what we see as, the good and the bad, let's say, of this. And as I say, our independence is key. And that really is quite important because obviously we work with a lot of other partners that maybe work with people like yourselves, who have, do your IT or do your virtualization in deployment, and then obviously we just come in as specialists to help. So that's how we work. Of course, dealing with right workers, we've all had to do that this year without question. Believe it or not, as a company, we actually have been working from home for about 2 years now, our guys, and we have to practice what we preach, right? So we've always done it that way, which has worked quite well to a point. And obviously since the lockdown, we've had we've sort of been no difference for us, apart from the fact also we're not allowed out of our house, which is a shame. But nonetheless, one of the key issues here for all businesses like yourselves is getting that mobility into your user base, where they can go where they want to go, work where they want to work, when they want, and and ultimately on any device basically where there's no issue. And obviously to do that, you have to centralize it. You can't have the old way of doing it, which is downloading files, uploading files back from a local workstation, wherever that may be. Now, that's got its place. We know that. As I say, with lockdown VPNs, that is a real, as I say, I alluded to earlier, but effectively, I've talked to so many companies that have had problems with their VPNs ultimately, because you're then putting a big load on your VPN when all your company has to go home and then work on it. And when you're dealing with graphical apps, large data sets, which you all do, I'm sure, you're having to get into that sort of approach where, the download and upload speeds of opening files, just opening files can take, quite a long time. And it can be frustrating for users. Once you're in it as well, then you've got latency, then you've got all these other sort of areas you've got to think about. So obviously the key here when you do let's say a remote solution, whether it's any of the the on-premise, the private or the public cloud, you're getting these benefits with IP security. Your data's safe, it's centralized. You're not having any kind of issues with people with data on laptops. memory sticks, etc. Causing you issues maybe for security reasons. And obviously, collaboration is key, of course, across geo, and that's what it does when you centralize all your data sets into a cloud environment or even an on-prem VDI environment. You're getting that benefit straight away. You're working off the latest data sets. It's all there as part of the solution. And of course, it saves your IT department's time and money. This way. And if you work with a experienced partner, then of course you get a much better, smoother operation. Setting up new desktops, updating environment. It's an instantaneous thing done in a virtual environment. It's very quick, done within minutes, and populates the whole user. Doesn't matter how many users you got, it will populate the whole user group. So there's lots of benefits around the IT management. Of course, we know that. Disaster recovery is an interesting one. Again, this is something else we're going to allude to as we go forward in this presentation. Because not many people maybe think, well, everyone thinks about it, I think, but whether they actually put in a suitable solution, particularly if you've got an on-premise environment, there's lots of, I talked to lots of customers about this, and, there's some interesting stuff available now to sort of service that isn't that expensive, which I'll get to a bit later in the presentation. And ultimately, you're looking for performance for all your users. You want a robust home working solution, a robust remote solution needs. You've got to have that performance like a local workstation, wherever they are. And that is key for everybody. And that's what we strive for, IMSCAD, without question. And of course, the infrastructure is key, but that's something we build out for you. The new normal. Of course, we've also heard that phrase written everywhere, but I think it really is. I just don't see how, everyone's going to want to work remotely moving forward now, however much they're going to be let back in the office. People will go back to the office, of course, and companies will use their offices. But I think that over the next few years, it will become more and more relevant that people will work from home and work remotely. So what I've done here is kind of listed a few things here about the on-premise versus cloud, because obviously, if you're in the Autodesk world, you've always had an on-premise environment, and you probably still have. We have a number of clients that have a VDI type approach, whether it's in the cloud or they've bought servers to do it on-premise, but they still have workstations running certain things. So, there is always a mix maybe in this sort of thing, but obviously for us, I think you're getting the same sort of benefits from any one of the solutions really. It's just whether you want that capital expenditure of buying kit up front, or you want to just go on a sort of operational pay per user per month type model, and then that really could change the sort of dynamic. But not every cloud solution gives you what you need to get the performance for the user. So there's always that balance and that trade-off between cost versus ease of use, ease of setup. Maybe you want to manage service type approach for a certain user group. That happens quite a bit. We see that quite a lot. You've got to bring disaster recovery in it, of course. And of course, I think, it's all about knowing what resource you're getting. One of the problems with the public cloud, and I'll say this, quite honestly, because we see this quite a lot when we work with customers in the public cloud, you're never quite sure what you're getting under the hood. You might know you're getting an NVIDIA T4 graphics card. You might think you're getting, this much RAM in an instance, for example. But, what about the processors? How quick are the processors? What processors are they? How many cores are you getting? It can be quite confusing understanding the split you need to have for different workflows. And this is where, we're obviously strong in this. So, I would say, so that scoping out sort of phase is really important, because you can end up spending a lot of money if you don't get it right. And managing that kind of whole environment, to maybe a certain amount of hours per day that you have it on. Because what's great about the cloud, it's so flexible, right? So you can turn it on and off at will, and that's one of the benefits of it. But of course, when you're doing and going back to an on-prem environment, of course you have to buy licensing, so that's normally quite a large cost at the start as well. So you've got hardware licensing, costs to think about. So that all sort of in the cloud becomes into a more, say, an operational sort of monthly fee. So that's maybe for some people, a better fit. But then if I'm going to get into this a bit further in the pricing, but, there is a lot of difference between, when you're doing an on-prem and you think about it over, say, a 4-year period versus a cloud deployment, so we'll get into that in a little bit. But you know, on-prem is still the most cost-effective option. We've seen it all the way through. It really is. Even though it may not be the most favourable, it's still the most cost-effective. So it's important to remember that. And as I say, IMSCAD, we're not biased at all. We don't mind you want to do cloud, on-premise, private cloud, whatever it is. You know, we're not here to sort of tell you one of the things better than another. But obviously, what I've tried to do in this, diagram here, or this slide, is talk a little bit about. I've done a few examples here, and this is really rough, so don't hold me to this. This is not necessarily what you get charged if you did it this way, but I've done it with a best guess scenario. So obviously you've got licensing. Think about this is for an on-premise solution with all the right kind of resource in the servers that you're going to need, and then obviously you're going to need a sort of secure VPN like a NetScaler for users to connect to remotely. You're going to have Grid, obviously, NVIDIA Grid. And obviously they charge for licensing, so you've got to buy those. You've got to buy maybe some Citrix and VMware licensing as well, along with Microsoft. And then of course you've got a setup fee of the environment, and then maybe some upfront consulting potentially, and then you've got maybe some support ongoing. So there's obviously quite a selection of costs there that you have to consider. But if you look here, what I've done here is the first. The first part there is up to 12 users. So obviously this is VDI desktops, okay? So you can have it obviously on one server. You could have one GPU on a server doing up to 12 users. That's the bare minimum ultimately. But for a solution cost to run for 4 to 5 years, and I say over 4 years is where I've worked this out. You've got an annual renewal of 10,000. I've done this in pounds, by the way, guys, just so I know a lot of you are in the US, so just bear with me on that. I'm sure you can do the calculation, but it's obviously, if dollars, it's probably going to be about 12, 13,000 and 60,000 maybe there on dollars. But obviously this is just to show you an example. See, it's 45,000 for the setup, to buy the kit, to buy the licensing, and then you've got these renewals of software here that you probably have to pay for, and some services included in that figure. And then obviously for 12 years, over 4 years, that figure will end up, so it's 4 years of that, of course, will end up around £148, so about $180 per user per month, okay? And that's on an on-premise VDI solution. Now that's I say, very rough figures, don't hold me to them. If you went for the sort of fully loaded server with 2 GPUs in, which would be here, and that would service up to 24 users. And I'll have to say there's a caveat here, because obviously NVIDIA, bless them, are still delivering really good graphics cards with more resource on them. So there are newer cards out that could do a bit more than this as far as the numbers, but it's more for an example, this, just to give you a feel for it. Because you're still going to buy the same server, but you're going to have 2 GPUs in there. You've got to double the amount of licensing, of course. And then you've got the renewals, a little bit more, obviously, on the renewals because you're doing more users. And that comes in at £109 a month per user for a VDI solution over a 4-year period. Okay? So, obviously, I then go up here, and this is basically doubling each time. So, obviously, but the price still remains pretty consistent around here. Okay? So, that is the issue. So, obviously, for that sort of money, it's not too bad. This is obviously an on-premise VDI solution, okay, as opposed to buying new workstations, because everyone seems to want to create a sort of cost comparison against that, which is fine to do, but it's not really relevant because you're not getting the benefits from a workstation. You can't take it with you everywhere, which obviously with this solution you're going to log in and you're just going to get the same performance wherever you're logging in from, all being well. So. And it just shows you on that particular slide the sort of level of cost you're looking at for an on-prem VDI per user per month model if you look at it versus a private cloud solution, which I've done exactly the same thing here. Okay, so this is exactly the same sort of setup with the same servers. I've done the same thing here with up to 12 users. Okay, but obviously on a private cloud, you've got to have a server as a minimum, right? One server. So one server for the cloud providers we work with is probably around the £2,500 a month, so about $3,000 a month, okay, for a server, okay. Now that's okay, but that's obviously then you're paying, minimal setup, I would say, and then you've obviously got storage on top of that. But normally it's around the $100 a terabyte kind of area per month. But obviously then you've got into, so you see the price has gone up obviously here. per user per month cost versus a managed cost. But this is obviously then managed, okay? So you've got someone like us bringing in, setting this up for you, managing it, supporting it, all inclusive in that price. So, you know, although it's gone up a lot in the cost column, you know, there may be a benefit to have it this way for you as a business. So, obviously, this is really where you've got to make that call whether you're willing to sort of pay a bit more just to get it. Because obviously, over a 4-year period, this could be over a 5-year period. You know, you wouldn't have to then renew everything in 4 years. So maybe every 4 years or even 5 years, you may have to upgrade your server. So in an on-prem environment, you probably have to buy some new kit. So then you've got to factor that in. But, you know, so there really is swings and roundabouts, really, when it comes to private cloud on-prem. You're getting the same type of server, it's just hosted somewhere else. And you don't have to worry about buying it, let's say. So, and obviously, you know, you're probably signing up to like a 2 or 3 year contract for this, just to be clear. But obviously, yeah, it just depends how much control you want, whether you need the servers on site, whether you don't. You know, it gives the same solution at the end of the day to the users. All right, so there's no difference there. So for me, you know, it's really a sort of apples and pears type situation. There's not much between it. You know, it's really up to you. Now, obviously, when you get into public cloud, it obviously gets a bit more complicated, of course, financially, because obviously with the public cloud, you can buy things by the hour. So really, you know, but obviously when you think of a user, I'm sure all your users are the same. They want to work at different times. They want to work on weekends occasionally. They want to work at 5 in the morning. They want to work at 10 at night. You know, not necessarily be held to a 8-10 hour day for a certain period of time on a 5-day rota. So, because some companies will do that, they'll give customers, you know, give their users 8 hours, 10 hours per day, you know, 8 till 6 or something, you know, and then cut it off. Because obviously with the public cloud, you can do that. You can manage your virtual machines that way. So you then can obviously reduce the cost, of course. But just to give you a feel for it, you know, if you think about it this way, you know, if you want it always on, and this is what I would always go look at, because really, if you're going to do this, and it's a production environment, you're going to have it on the whole time, really. But obviously, it can get quite expensive. But these instances, this one instance I've put together is quite a high-end instance for. This is on Microsoft Azure, and this is an MV16 AS V4. Okay, so it's got 56 gig of RAM in it, so it's probably enough for 1 or even 2 users. So, you know, maybe you have 2 users on this, and it has actually, in this time, it's actually done in dollars, as you can see. It's $600 per month. Now, obviously, all the same, you know, things remain. This is obviously with NVIDIA graphics cards. Obviously, you don't have to buy them; they're already there in Azure. All the Microsoft licensing taken care of in Azure. It connects to your 365 environment. There's a lot of benefits to it. Active Directory, SQL is all there, you know, involved in the solution. So, effectively, you know, you've really got a situation where, you know, that's all good. This is all really good news that you have this type of, you know, set up all ready to go in Azure. But obviously the cost then is quite high for this instance. So if you gave it to one person, you're paying $600 a month, and that would be quite a lot of money for some people, I think, to have an instance that way. And of course, then you've still got to support it at some level, whether you do that yourself or you have a partner do that with you. Now, there are MV4 and MV8 instances, which are the lesser instances. But obviously, we've tested MV4, and I'll tell you, for Autodesk type applications and things with graphical, you know, requirements and speed and data, lots of data, you know, they're not that great in my view. And my guys, my engineers have all said, you know, they're not really happy with them as a solution. So, you know, the MV8 is a little bit better. It's a bit more resource in it, but nonetheless, I think you've got to be really honest about, you know, the sort of performance you can expect. And also, you've got to know the ins and outs of Azure and how you set it up. So there's a lot of work that has to go into that to get this sort of done. But I appreciate everyone wants to get to the public cloud in the end. And I think that's obviously going to be the challenge to do that. But I think where we are now today, in my view, you know, these private cloud and on-premise options, for people using graphical software, you're going to get the performance and you're going to get the price right, in my view. Whereas the public cloud, you're a little bit left open to what resource you're going to get beyond the instance itself. And you've also got to set it all up, and you've got to manage it, and you've got to make sure you don't get billed a load of money on bandwidth and various other things that they charge for. And you've got to know what you're doing. You've got to manage the environment. Someone needs to manage that as a job almost. So it can get quite complex. But I'm not saying it won't be there in the end. And I know we talk a lot to Azure ourselves, really about their instances, and they like getting feedback from us. Because obviously, at the end of the day, we said to them, your processes are too slow. You know, people in your space, people in the AEC world and the manufacturing world, you know, they need 3 gigahertz plus processors as a minimum, really. When you think what the workstations you have on the desk are, you know, some of them are 4.5 in some cases. You're not going to get that in a server, but you know, you can get 3.5. You know, you're going to go some. You know, it's going to be a pretty quick server. So really, you know, it's a balance. You know, everyone's got different reasons for doing different things, and we accept that. But I think it's a really interesting comparison. You know, when you think about it, per user per month, you know, what you get from the public cloud. And obviously, I can share all this stuff with you quite happily after the presentation. You know, I've talked a little bit about this. Don't have to sort of dwell on this really too long. But effectively, you know, obviously you're going to need NVIDIA grid in there, whatever you're doing, whether that's however you deploy it. And it will just give those users that graphical power that you need. And obviously, there's different ways of cutting up the card. So obviously, you can get into different profiles that each user needs. We've got users and customers that have 2 queue profiles, that even have 1 queue profiles, which is 1 gig of graphical RAM on a VDI, and it works fine. You know, some people I think get a bit carried away with how much GPU they really need, but it depends on the app mix. Okay, so the apps are really important. If you're using 3ds Max, of course you're going to need 8 gig of graphical RAM. If you're using Revit or AutoCAD, you know, you might only need 1 or 2, you know, to get a good experience. So I think what we tend to do at IMSCAD, we always go to the lowest common denominator first and try and work it up from there, because the reality is that you know, you don't want to be spending or over-resourcing things if you don't need to, because it gets quite expensive otherwise. And all these industries I mentioned here, AEC, manufacturing, automotive, new media, they're all potential customers that really, you know, would, I think, you know, with this type of solution, now with so many home working scenarios happening, you know, really need to look at it one way or the other, you know, in a proper way. You know, workstation-based industries, you know, it's all about performance at the end of the day. You know, you've got to have that performance. It's got to be snappy. It's got to be quick. It's got to be no lag. You know, it's got to work and work well. And it can do. It does work well. We've got numerous clients that will tell you so. And, you know, desktop as a service really does provide that. And it's just really how you go about it. There's the 3 options that I mentioned around VDI on-premise, VDI private cloud, and obviously we're using the public cloud. So you've got a few choices in how you go about it. And even if you did on-premise for 3 years and then look to go to the cloud after that, you know, there may be more options in the cloud that are a bit cheaper. But it is quite an expensive journey at the moment to go to the cloud with a graphical environment. So, you know, obviously there's the normal sort of desktops we do as well, just to be clear, you know, because obviously not everyone uses graphical desktops, but obviously we tend to start with the hard stuff and work back from there. So, you know, obviously with Windows 10, now, you know, sometimes, you know, the GPU can help Windows 10 quite a lot, you know, even if you had like half a gig, for example, of GPU RAM, you know, you'd have a much more enriched experience on your normal desktop. But a lot of the time we have customers that really just, you know, want to have a basic desktop environment, which, you know, the public cloud's very good for that. It's not expensive, but you still got to set it all up. So obviously it's the same job, just not bringing in the graphical element. But yeah, and obviously there's different ways if you're going on-prem or private cloud where you can do more of a published desktop, a shared environment, which means not VDI, not dedicated resource, but actually just getting an app delivered to a desktop that someone clicks on and has access to their environment. And that is just done on a shared basis where the resource across the server or across the instance is shared between all the users. So obviously, if you had a highly spec NVIDIA grid server, you know, with say 48 gig or 64 gig of graphical RAM, you know, user 1 would have 64 gig graphical RAM on their desktop, whereas user 2 comes on, they have 32 gig of graphical RAM because it splits, and vice versa till you get down to, you know, where the bottleneck might be. But you know, it's another way of deploying it. It's just another option of how you can go about this. It may give you more users per server. You know, it's just something to think about. So, you know, this is obviously just to give you a feel for the software stuff. I mean, there's so much out there on this. You know, we've even got Hyper-V in there now. We've got all these different protocols that we can use. whether you're doing VMware, Citrix, even RDP, which is obviously what Azure use primarily, which they've always used. Windows have always used that RDP solution. Because delivering it to the endpoint is obviously important as well. You want a low bandwidth option to deliver the best speed. And then obviously, we tend to find, PC over IP is a really good, from Teradata is a really good protocol, but that's obviously, for really high-end graphical work. But Citrix ICA is, I think renowned to be probably it was certainly the first to market for graphics, but it seems to be the one that's been picked up most for graphics. But I have to say, VMware are coming up fast on the heels with Blast and Blast Extreme. Really interesting way they do it. So, there's plenty of options, and all this is available in that on-prem or that private cloud environment. With the public cloud, obviously, if you go into Azure, there is VMware in Azure and there is Citrix in Azure. But again, you've got to consider the costs seriously on that, because it does get a bit out of control if you're not careful. Obviously, Autodesk actually, interestingly, with their licensing changes recently, some of you may know about, of course, going to named user licensing. So that takes away any barriers around how you deploy your Autodesk software, which is really good. I think it's really a positive step forward, because there's always been a confusion around Autodesk licensing and how, what you could do, what you couldn't do, how you do it. Is it network licensing? Is it single user licensing? Could you virtualize it? All that sort of stuff. So that's a really simplification if you've done that of that. One of the areas that not many people look at, but we really look at closely, is how you work as a business. Your user workflows. It's really important to understand how you deal with your models. How they've split up, how they've worked on. What disciplines you have in place, because a lot of the time if you don't get that right, the whole thing will slow down anyway. It'll slow down in a workstation environment. It's important that is looked at. Storage, of course, everyone needs fast storage, right? So we always go SSD as a minimum. It's just the way it is. But obviously for file storage, you just need a standard sort of disk storage. So again, this is all about, if you go in the public cloud, how do you do? Do you need, what storage you need? There's normally 4 or 5 different types, right? So you've got to understand what's right for certain workflows. It's just the way it is. Network performance, again, is ultimately one of the main factors here we're talking about, because again, customers, you can have a dispersed user group, around across the US, across Europe, whatever it may be, and if they're getting 200 milliseconds of latency, it's going to be tough to get a good performance, for anything really. But when you're doing graphics, even more so. But obviously, the great thing is with some of the stuff that we get up to with Citrix particularly, is it can be really tweaked, and there's various tools around WAN optimization and stuff like that you can use to really improve it. But obviously, the back end needs to be right. If you haven't got your server room or your your infrastructure right, meaning a minimum of 10 gig as a back end network, stuff like that is really important to get right. Those basic things. We all know that networks are up and down sometimes, right? So, corporate networks tend to underperform, if they're not absolutely, done perfectly. There's always too much stuff on it. But obviously, we tend to find when you go out of the corporate network onto the open internet, you get a pretty good performance. So it's a real chicken and egg, really. And always with network performance, it's a bit of a dark subject to talk to a customer about, because obviously there's so many unknowns. But you obviously, open internet does work quite well these days. Most people have some sort of decent broadband type environment, and obviously working from home, most people would get a better probably environment than they would have normally, or they upgrade it because they're working at home. And I remember when the kids had to be homeschooled, and they were online the whole time. My wife's online, I'm online. You end up with this kind of, gosh, we need some bandwidth here. And when you're dealing with graphical apps, and it's quite important to make sure you've got enough there. And it's just about getting it the best it can be. But again, I think it's all about getting that. We've had lockdowns, we've had coronavirus. Everyone's changed the way they work now, and it's all about getting the best way of doing that for your business with the best technology in place to deliver that. And that's really what we're about here. This is just a bit of a side thing. I said I'd talk about it earlier, but obviously this is something about Azure and how we do a DR solution. Because obviously, if you think you've got an on-premise environment, maybe you've got just a standard workstation environment, maybe you've got a virtual environment, maybe you've got whatever you've got. It doesn't really matter if it's on-prem. What if you lose access to the office? What if you can't go there? What if something, act of God, something happens? There's obviously been a lot of talk. I've talked to a lot of customers about this, and obviously you can buy another load of kit and stick it in a data center and have a sort of M+1 type environment. But there's got to be a smarter way with the public cloud now, and I think there is. And what we do is with this is obviously you've got Azure there. Most people have Office 365 at some point in their business. You need to obviously set up some base infrastructure, some storage for the VMs, some site-to-site VPNs connected to your Active Directory. But you can basically, with Azure, you can pay for that infrastructure per month, and it's not a lot. It's not a lot of money. It depends on obviously how big your infrastructure you're going to need. But when you need it, they can spin up the instances and the storage, absolutely immediately. And so effectively, you've got now a situation where you can literally within hours have 200, 300, 500 users going strong on the same Active Directory and the same infrastructure you're used to and your users are used to, with the same logins and everything as you always had. So it's a really neat way of doing some disaster recovery for your on-premise environment. So just something to bear in mind. Something we can talk to you about offline. But obviously we have they call this thing reserved instances in Azure. But to be honest, I think the reserved instances, they're quite expensive. So what you're going to need to do is just assure that if you've got, say, 100 users and you needed to go into DR within half a day or a day, you have that environment ready to go. So it's just it's probably the most cost-effective way of doing DR for anyone's business that I've seen. And it's a real clever sort of solution they offer. And it's an assurance policy, right? So if you haven't got anything in place, I really would consider it as an option. But anyway, yeah, so it's very, very good. So also overall, guys, what is the best way? What is the best way for you to do your, and obviously there's no one answer here, of course, but your users don't care. They just want performance, as I've written down there. Everyone wants to do cloud, get to the cloud, go on the cloud journey. We get that, and I think that's right. But obviously, for performance, it's still probably on-prem VDI. It'll give you a best performance because you're completely in control of it. You can resource your servers properly. You know what you're getting. And, operationally, of course, yeah, public cloud, private cloud, yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. Again, all these issues, management, cost effectiveness, I'll put in on-premise, it is probably the most cost effective still over a 4-year period. And, the most the most expensive is public cloud still. So, you've got to take that into account at the end of the day. You don't necessarily need to do it all in one go. You don't need to go to Microsoft Azure, immediately. You can do it stage by stage with certain things, first, and then obviously work it through. But with desktops, it really is, about the performance. And, I think more and more, people ask us about Azure and AWS and Google, whatever it may be. And, more and more they look at it and come back to a private cloud or an on-prem. So there's no right and wrong answer, of course. We've got the experience. We can obviously talk you through it, help you through it, give you some advice. All desk applications are not normal. They're not normal apps that just can work in a normal environment like 80% of your other apps could do in your business. And this is where obviously the public cloud, struggles a little bit because obviously it's built for the 80%, right? So unfortunately, all desk customers sit in the 20% because there's a bit more to it. But it's, you can. Why? Yeah, in some ways, why try and do it? You work with a partner, you'll learn a lot, you'll get a lot of knowledge yourselves, and then obviously you can decide how you move forward from there. But we deploy and support. That's all we do. So we'll advise you on what to get, how to get it, what instances, what servers, whatever it may be. We'll help you through the whole process. And of course, yeah, I'll go back to it again. It's all about performance of the apps and the desktop, and everyone needs that when they're working at home now. And the good news is we have some demo servers. So if you want to have a test, you want to try it out with some of your apps, try it out with some of your data, we can let you do that. It's a free service we offer for a couple of days. Get a couple of users on it to try it out. Feel free to reach out. Absolutely fine. We'll get you some time scheduled on it. Well, thanks for listening. If there's any questions, obviously you can email me there directly. You can look at our website. It's all on there. If there is any questions, you can go into the question panel and put any in. I don't see any at the moment. We are recording this session, so obviously we'll share it with you, so you can have another look if you wish. And without any questions showing there, I will say thank you very much for listening. It's been great to have you all here, and have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and hopefully we'll talk soon. Thanks, guys. Bye now. Oh, 1 second. Wait. I think we've just had a question. Hang on. About Teams. Have you tried storing drawings? Okay, I think I might take this one offline. It's about storing. Just 1 second. Storing. Have you tried storing drawings in Teams or SharePoint? Okay, I think we'll take that one offline. Thank you for that. But I don't know is the answer to that. I'll have to ask some of my guys. But thanks for the question. We'll come back to you anyway. But anyway, I appreciate your help, guys, and listening. And we'll get an email out to you with the recording. Many thanks. Have a great day. Bye now.